Ladies and gentlemen, the Shrek Gaming video, we're going to be asking the Xbox One versus the PC. Can Microsoft find the right balance? Now, just before we go any further, I am slightly sick at the moment, so if I sound a little dejected or lacking energy, it's simply because my throat is a little sore and I don't want it to blow out halfway through. Now, with that said, let's talk about the big thing that everyone's concerned about at the moment. Are Microsoft basically putting out the Xbox One to pasture? And if not, should you as an Xbox One owner be worried where the console is going to be heading in, let's say, the next couple of years? Well, it's fair to say that Microsoft's plans to unify the Xbox One and PC gaming experiences are easily one of the biggest stories floating around the internet right now. It doesn't matter whether you're a gamer or whether you're a tech fan or whether you're just a regular internet folk, you're probably seeing stories of Phil Spencer's everywhere, whether it's Forbes, PC Gamer, God knows. Now, Microsoft are essentially planning or considering abandoning the fixed specification of Xbox One and allowing the hardware to be upgradable. This will basically blur the lines between the Xbox One and a Windows 10 based PC. To add salt to potential injury, the Xbox One exclusive titles that we've come to expect on the system, for example Quantum Break, Gears of War, and to a lesser extent Killer Instinct, we've known that's been planned for the PC for some time, are going to be making its way to Windows 10 on the desktop, or laptop, or what have you. And finally, Microsoft are taking commitment to PC gaming seriously, which is great because they've been promising they're going to do that for some time and reneged. But it's also possible that this is actually hurting their trust with Xbox One faithful gamers. Now, let's put this into some context. A few years ago, before the announcement of DirectX 12, Microsoft did have a very loose grasp on PC gaming. It was basically slipping away. It was like they were on the edge and it was slowly starting to lose their tenure on it. Now, when you think about it, Windows was still the dominant operating system that you would use to play PC games, without a question. But it was more of a means to an end. You weren't really associating necessarily Microsoft with gaming anymore. It was more, it's a piece of hardware. It's like a mouse or it's a keyboard. It was just a means to the end, and you were really thinking of Steam or SteamOS or AMD or Mantle or Nvidia or any of these other companies, even Origin from EA. You were more associating those with PC gaming because websites like GMG, Green Man Gaming, websites like GOG, Good Old Games, they were starting to do a lot more for PC gaming than what Microsoft were doing. Gamers were becoming disenfranchised with Microsoft. We were sick of DirectX 11, which is one of the reasons that AMD, of course, released Mantle, and you all know the story, so I won't bore you with it. This is very different to what it was like in like the late 90s and even early 2000s. If you were a PC gamer back then, you're going to remember things such as MS-DOS. You're going to remember early Windows, like Windows 95 or 98 for Quake and Doom and all these other games which were just amazing. Remember the early Half-Lives and, let's say, Microsoft Flight Simulators and Mech Commanders and bloody Microsoft Flight Sticks and joypads and all this stuff. Microsoft were pushing it out, gaming. And essentially the PC to Microsoft, they were trying to compete because back then the Voodoo 2 cards were coming out, Voodoo cards were coming out, Nvidia were becoming competitive, and it was kind of like this console versus PC thing. But back then on the PC, it was the only system that could play online, and of course back then it was really finicky, but still. I could perform some deep analysis on Microsoft's decision to move more towards gaming on the Xbox, and also their lack of focus on the desktop for Windows. We all know about Windows 8, right? But why are things changing? Now, before we move into what the impact is, let's remember that essentially system exclusives, while we may not like them as customers, they're understandable. Essentially, you might have a game from a third party which might look a little different on one system It might have, you know, let's say for the original Mortal Kombat on the SNES, it had no blood, and the fatalities were censored and all this stuff, but it was still Mortal Kombat. You still got to play it. And sure, your Genesis or Mega Drive owning friends may laugh at you, but who cares really, right? Same thing for other titles on both systems. There may be some visual differences, but generally speaking, if it was released on both, it would be pretty much playable. This is not, of course, the same as a platform exclusive. Like, for example, Mario. Was there Mario on the Genesis? No. Could you play Streets of Rage on the SNES? No. Could you play Chrono Cross, for the sake of argument? Yes, it's not first party. On the N64? No, you couldn't. In other words, those games were essentially system sellers. There were reasons to buy the system. But this is no longer the case on the Xbox One, because it's starting to lose some system exclusives to the PC. Now, it's kind of a tricky situation, because I can understand Xbox One owners being upset, particularly with the late announcement of Quantum Break. But Xbox One owners at least had one main comfort, and that was their hardware was fixed spec. Yes, the Xbox One versions were going to look inferior, but their system was also considerably cheaper. This is kind of a nice thing, right? You don't have to worry about upgrades. Your Xbox One's the same as Bob's Xbox One, which is the same as John's Xbox One, which is the same as Jill's Xbox One, which is the same as Jenny's Xbox One. It doesn't matter. The game is going to run identical. So you don't have those extra hardware costs. You know what you're getting. But now, according to Phil Spencer, of course, he doesn't want to do that. They don't want to ride out a generation of console for 7 years and then basically it restarts the cycle. Fixed hardware, however, has some primary benefits, obviously the ones I've just mentioned, plus as well for developers it makes things a lot easier. They know where essentially the roadblocks are for the system, they know what they can get out of it, they know how to get the most out of it, and they also know what peripherals, that type of stuff, is available as services for the system. Now, an upgrade is not new. Some upgrades have done fairly well. For example, the RAM upgrade for the N64. The Sega Saturn with its 4MB RAM card, which would give an error if certain titles tried to load, for example Vampire Savior. In other cases, for example Marvel Superheroes, the game would just simply display less animation. Then, if you want to even go back further in time, the Genesis/Mega Drive had some upgrades released, the moderately successful Sega CD or Mega CD if you prefer, and the not so well received 32X, and even the SNES with its Super FX chips, essentially were, I guess, a roundabout way of upgrading the hardware and making it do more things. So potentially we could see an Xbox One which could run at higher resolutions, better frame rates, better visuals, for example better lighting, textures, draw distances, that type of stuff, which is great for folks who want to play on the Xbox One with a high resolution, 60 FPS, whatever they manage to squeeze out of it. However, this is done whether it's going to be a newly released SKU every so often, whether it's going to be an upgradable box or a plug-in or something like that, or whether Microsoft simply sends a pixie to your house. We don't know. We can only wait, because Phil Spencer and Microsoft are not too keen to tell us their roadmaps, which is somewhat understandable. Okay, so now we've got a basic understanding after about 9 minutes of video why the bloody hell, or what the bloody hell the differences are between them. Okay, now, where's the rub? The problem is Microsoft might well be painting itself into a bit of a corner, making essentially the Xbox One a bit superfluous. Now, I don't mean that no one will play on it, because the Xbox One still has some benefits. For example, you might have certain folks who just want to play on the joypad. I have friends like that. They just hate keyboard mouse. I don't understand it. I think it's alien, but they do. They become confused and frightened over the 100 and odd buttons on the keyboard, and they just can't use it very well. And they prefer playing with their friends on Xbox Live, on the Xbox. They're comfortable with that. They're happy with that. And let's face it, certain games would work really well with crossplay. For example, Killer Instinct. Other games, not so much. Imagine a keyboard, a mouse versus pad on something like Halo. It would be not ideal. Moving on, let's say you have an Xbox One and they have to consistently upgrade the games or upgrade the Xbox to get the best visuals. Obviously, it depends how often this has to occur, but even if it's every couple of years, that roughly coincides with how often most users upgrade their PC's GPU. Remember, CPUs typically last about 3 to 5 years. GPUs last about 18 to 24 months, depending on what levels you're willing to turn down the graphics and how good of a generational upgrade it is. It's looking like Polaris and Pascal, which are the next generation of GPUs, which are going to come out about mid this year, supposedly, are going to be rather substantial improvements over what we've currently got for desktops. If you want numbers, about twice as fast for about the same price is what is being bandied about, which means that, and this is probably going to upset people, but I don't really care, the next generation of GPUs are going to stamp on the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One from an absolute great height. They will. And it's not going to cost a lot to do that. If you want evidence, even Roy Taylor over at AMD has said that currently to run a GTX 970, run a VR based display, you need a GTX 970 or an R9 390 or an R9 290X, something like that. And that costs X, about 250 Great British pounds. They want to bring that down. They want to bring down the barrier of entry significantly in terms of cost, so it improves and increases the market share of virtual reality. And how they're going to do that, at least with AMD, is a Polaris architecture, which means that the manufacturing costs of producing smaller GPUs is going to be reduced because there's a silicon used and all of that jazz. And on top of that, just quite simply, you're going to pack more performance in, which means that the current generation of GPUs, which are around, well, depends on what one you go, you can go all the way up to 10 T-flops of performance if you go for the dual end, it's going to be even more insane. You're probably going to get GPUs quite soon, which are going to be, in the teens plus, without spending exorbitant amounts of money. And you'll probably have to get like 4 to 5 T-flops quite cheaply. We're talking 150 at max, which is 2 or 3 times faster than what the Xbox One or PS4 are capable of. Now, I'm not saying this to badmouth the PS4 or Xbox One, far from it, but, and this is going hand in hand with comments on the recent videos and Facebook and everything else where I've been interacting with people over the last 24 or so hours since these announcements, you've got to remember that the PC has a lot going for it. It has cheaper games. This is objectively, maybe not through Windows Store, but the cross-platform games, or rather the games which are third-party games, let's say Ubisoft or Electronic Arts, or titles which are also going to appear on the PlayStation 4, which are exclusive on the PS4, won't appear on the PC, on the Xbox One, but do appear on the PC, say Street Fighter V. These are really good arguments why you might want to buy a PC or invest in a PC. And yes, there are some arguments about Xbox One being smaller, but they don't really count for much anymore. Small form factor systems are becoming insanely powerful, and you can stream as well from your high-end system to a low-end system, or even to Nvidia Shield or another tablet or whatever you want to do. It's becoming less of a big deal. Now, as I said, I'm not saying that there's not going to be a usage for the Xbox One. It certainly will have still people who love the system. And for those who really hate the idea of needing to manage drivers, which isn't that difficult anymore, but some people still are quite technophobes. Maybe those who don't want to manage the idea of, I need to know some research to buy a GPU, which isn't that difficult anymore because there's an abundance of information out there, but even so, or even folks who just simply don't want to do anything. All they want to do is just game, and all they want to do is just put a disc into the system. And maybe they've just been comfortable with console gaming all their lives, and that's what they want to do. And so the Xbox One is not going to die, in my opinion, but, it's going to be interesting how the community deals with this. Now, moving on just a little bit, the console market, the games market, actually, in the UK alone is worth about 4 billion. I've only done a little research on this, and I just pulled figures from the UK, and it's about 4 billion. Console hardware is about excuse me, about 915 million. 915 million. Box software is worth almost $1 billion. Mobile game about 550 million. It's insane. Console gaming and PC alone are worth over £1 billion. That's a lot of money. That's a freaking lot of money. That was up, by the way, over 2013's figures by almost 20%. That's a fuck ton, excuse the language. Now, why is it I bring that up? Because to Microsoft, they don't really care necessarily how you interact with their marketplace. They don't care necessarily how you interact with their games or their ecosystem. But have you noticed the key word there? Their ecosystem. Their ecosystem. Their ecosystem. They just want to make sure that they are making money regardless. Which, they're a business. I'm not, going to criticize them for that. Phil Spencer has told PC Gamer recently, and I quote, "I look at the work we're doing on platforms as an enabler for us becoming relevant in PC gaming. I wouldn't say our strategy is to unify, because I hear unify and I worry people interpret that, my own teams included. Hey, we just want to say a game is a game and all games should run everywhere." What he's basically saying is that some games are still going to be platform exclusives. Like, for example, actually the Singularity was the example he gave. It just won't work on a controller. I mean, you could try, but it wouldn't go well. It wouldn't be... Essentially, you'd have to really change the core nature of the game, or it just wouldn't play how you'd expect it to. So there are still going to probably be the odd platform exclusive. It's not like people are, maybe making it out to be, but every bloody game on the Xbox One is going to come to the PC. There's still going to be some exclusives, or maybe some time behind the Xbox One and the PC release, which is absolutely fine. I have no issues with that. The real question is this going to hurt Microsoft in the standing of console gamers? Maybe. But if enough people convert to PC, they probably just don't care that much. That's the honest truth. There's probably going to be some folks who will criticize Microsoft, and there are going to be some folks who love the idea of an upgradable system, and both have merits. They both do. It's just confusing how Microsoft can handle this, and I'll use the same example as I used just yesterday. Imagine in 2017 you buy a game, let's say for the sake of argument, the latest Call of Duty, and at the back of that game it has a sticker, and that sticker says must be this amount of hard drive space in your device, requires XYZ, and requires Xbox One Model A, or maybe it will say Model B or above. So at the back, Model B or above, or Model A minimum, B or above recommended. If you don't have Model B or above, you won't get to play it at the highest graphics settings, you won't get all the best lighting, it won't run at highest frame rates, you won't get, a blowjob and a hook at the end of it. It's just going to be the base game. On the other hand, if you have the best Xbox system available, then you're going to get, once again, those higher frame rates. You're going to get a better experience, maybe larger maps. That could be an interesting one. How this is going to handle, and how this is going to be handled by studios and developers in real life, is going to be an interesting situation, an interesting quandary. It's going to be really hard for some customers to come to the conclusion that every couple of years, potentially, their Xbox Ones won't be able to run certain software. How Microsoft are going to handle that, it's just unknown, because unfortunately we just don't know, because they've not revealed the details, once again, because of the roadmap. Essentially, Microsoft at the moment are building an ecosystem. They are a service-based company, whether it's the cloud, whether it's Windows, whether it's Windows Store. That's what they care about. They're worried about basically losing ground to Steam. They're worried about losing ground to, Google with the Play Store. That's what they're trying to focus on. They want to serve us as customers, and they want to keep us as customers. They don't want to risk losing the PC, because the PC owners have moved on to other things, whether it's the Vulkan API, which was a real possibility at one point, and it still may be, whether it's Steam crushing them by releasing SteamOS, which is also a potential possibility. If they hadn't have intervened, Steam might, or rather Valve might have just said, hey, we're just going to keep pushing Steam, we're going to release it as like as a gaming OS only, and people might just have dual booted or run it as a virtual machine or whatever else. It's a really interesting take, and honestly, over the next couple of years, I have a feeling that the gaming market, at least if you're a Microsoft fan, is going to really have changed. Anyway, hopefully you've enjoyed my exploration of this. I won't really say I came to any conclusion. Those are just a few of my thoughts right now. In 3 weeks' time, 1 week's time, 2 weeks' time, who knows? I might be completely and utterly changing my mind on this as Phil and Microsoft and the rest of the studios fill us in more of how this is going to work. For now, I'm going to remain cautiously optimistic, and I think that there is definitely a place for the Xbox One and the PC to coexist, and I think it's just a great time for gamers. But that's my opinion. Anyway, hopefully you've enjoyed the video. Do click on the link in the video description if you want an article of this, which is kind of condensed and a bit more, I guess you could say, articulate. But anyway, for now, I'm going to get going. Hopefully you've enjoyed the video. I'll see you soon. Take care. Remember to like, share, subscribe, comment, and all that bollocks, and I'll be very grateful. Take care of yourselves. Bye for now.